Thank you, and good morning to those of us who are joining us on the West Coast, and good afternoon to those of you who are joining us on the East Coast. We're thrilled to have so many of you join us today for our first webinar as part of our Top Growth Strategies for Agents series. To get the most out of your time today, we have just a few housekeeping things we want to go through. You should notice on the right side of your screen there is a QA panel. We would encourage you to ask questions throughout all of the content. At the end of each speaker session, we will then ask those questions live and make sure that they're answered. If you also have any technical difficulties, you can go ahead and ask those in that QA panel also. If there's a question that you ask that we are unable to answer, we'll be sure and get back to you within 24 hours. By now, you should actually be hearing what I'm saying. If you're still not hearing sound, you can go ahead and dial in on those numbers listed there below. So with that, I'd actually like to introduce our esteemed speakers for the day. We're pleased to have Brian Dietz, Senior Vice President and Principal from Reagan Consulting, join us, along with Vertafore Vice President Solution Consulting, Doug Moore. So with that, Brian, I'd like to hand it off to you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Tara, and thanks everybody for tuning in this afternoon. My name is Brian Dietz. I am a partner in Reagan Consulting and have been here for 11 years. And our firm is focused on the insurance distribution industry, and all of what we do is for insurance agents and brokers all across the country and all across North America. And we're going to be talking today about growth strategies and specifically about producer recruiting and development. And we're going to do this because we did a study a few years ago, but even going back beyond that, throughout my tenure here and throughout our existence as a firm, the number one question we get from agents and brokers is when we're out visiting folks across the country is, hey, how are people hiring producers? Where are people finding producers? How are people developing producers? And so we kind of had this in the back of our mind. And then we started measuring some statistics. And one of the statistics that we measured is a statistic called the weighted average shareholder age and the weighted average producer age. And so we've got in the back of our head that people are struggling to find producers and hire and develop producers. And then we also look at these graphs about how our industry is aging. The weighted average shareholder age is simply a weighted average age based on share ownership of an agency, and the weighted average producer age is basically a weighted age of an agency's producer base based on who controls what volume of business. And over the last 9 years, the shareholder age and the producer age have each gone up about 3 years. And so there's a steady trend of aging in our industry. Some of this is normal, especially as people started to stay in the workforce longer after 2008, 2009, and 2010, but it's not all normal. And some of that aging reflects the difficulty that agents and brokers have in hiring that next generation of producers. When we dove into our study on producers, we took that and we came up with the premise of our study, which is success and long-term independence for an agency hinge on that broker's ability to recruit and develop talent. In other words, if you want to stay as an independent agent and continue to grow into the future, you've got to be able to recruit the next generation of producers and continue that process over and over and over again. And so we dove into a study called the Producer Recruiting and Development Study to try to tackle that issue and understand more about how people were doing that. One of the first things we learned is that there is a producer hiring deficit in this industry. The study was done in 2 phases. One, a general broad survey that went to many, many firms, and we asked folks how they were hiring, whether they were hiring sufficiently, and then we did a bunch of analysis and modeling, and we found that 55 to 60% of firms are not hiring enough producers to continue their growth and to continue their long-term independence. And so when we got into the meat of the study, we were trying to figure out this one question: how do you hire as an agent and broker, and how do you hire well? And we looked at data from thousands of producers. Our first survey contained basic information on 4,000 producers, and then we got in-depth information on 1,500 producers. Things like what they were doing before they were hired. When they were hired, how much did they make? Did they come in as a specialized producer? Did they work in teams? What business line were they in? How long did it take to validate? How old were they? What was their level of education? And so we knew a lot about a large producer pool. And our goal was to try to figure out, for agencies that are doing this well, how? And for agencies that aren't doing this well, which are a lot of agencies, how do you do it? How do you hire, and how do you hire well? And so we're going to dive into that and talk for 15 or 20 minutes about that. It'll be pretty fast-paced, but there are 6 things that we'll go through about how to hire and hire well. And the first of those things is to define your hiring needs. When we dove into this, we found that many agents and brokers didn't actually have a hiring plan. Many of their producer hires were, a couple of our partners had kids graduating from school, and so they came on board. We had a family friend who was looking for a new job. We had a new producer move to town, and it was much more of an opportunistic hire as opposed to an established, intentional plan. And so step number 1, if you want to hire and hire well, is to be thoughtful about it. Define how many people you want to hire, and you do that by answering 2 questions. The first is, how fast do you want to grow? And the second is, who is retiring when? Now, you can basically use those 2 questions to create a math equation. We won't go through the whole model that's spread out before us there. But if you think about how fast you want to grow, then you can think about, from that, how much new business you need to write. And you can figure out from how much new business you need to write, how many producers you need to write that new business. And that will inform your hiring needs. You bake into that retirements upcoming, and you can set up a basic math equation and go through these numbers. We won't do it here. But by answering those 2 questions and kind of playing with some numbers, you can develop a hiring plan. You can say, gosh, we need 2 or 3 producers in order to hit our organic growth goals. We've got a couple of senior producers retiring in the next 3 years. We're going to need to replace their production capacity as well as hire for growth. So we're going to need to hire another 4 or 5 producers. Some of them are going to make it, some of them aren't. So if we need a net 5 producers, maybe we need to hire 10. And you can get into a little bit of a more systematic, thoughtful process about your hiring needs. And that is step 1. Step 2 is, when you figure out how many folks you need to hire, you need to figure out who those hires should be. Now, here is a current picture of hiring in our industry. We looked at hires based on background, and this is of the 1,500 producers covered in our study. 16% were established producers that came with a book of business. 40% were producers that came without a book, subject to restrictive covenants or other things. 10% were insurance industry folks that were not in production. 29% came from outside the industry. 6 came from college. When you look at the success rate of those hired, it's not surprising that 81% of hires that came with a book of business were successful. What was a little surprising is that the basic success rate for all other hires is very, very consistent, between 56 and 59%. For folks from college to producers without a restrictive covenant, to carrier folks, to folks that had recently been selling office equipment. So the success rate didn't deviate very much. The other thing that was really surprising to us in this data is that only 35% of hires come from outside the industry. And that presents a little bit of a difficult pool. We're basically recycling our talent in the agent and broker industry with 2/3 of hires already in the industry. There's an opportunity for folks to bring on hires from outside of the industry and kind of create some new blood in the marketplace. We looked at hiring and success rates by gender and by business line, and we found out that the majority of hires were male. 85 and 15 was the split in commercial lines, 75 and 25 basically in benefits, and more personal lines hires were female than male. The success rates were also pretty interesting, especially in employee benefits. 7% delta in success rates, 69% for females in benefits and 62% for males. Now, this gives you a basic idea of what the hiring is, the who question. But the most important thing for agents and brokers when deciding who to hire is to focus on folks that will fit your agency's culture and your agency's model. Not one size fits all in hiring producers. There is not one successful producer profile because there are various successful agency profiles. And if your firm has a lot of resources in training and development and a lot of specialized resources in production, then you might be able to hire college kids that can come on and latch on to some of those resources. But if your firm doesn't have that and it's more of the producer out on his own, then you may need someone with business and sales experience and potentially industry experience as well. So to illustrate this point, I'm going to use an analogy. I'm a fan of Virginia basketball and the highs and lows that come with Virginia basketball, and I think that a lot of producer recruiting makes a good analogy for athletics recruiting, especially at the college level. And so this is an example of when a team that I root for, Virginia, hired quote unquote somebody that did not fit their model. Virginia went out and recruited a kid named Sacha-Killeya Jones, 6'10", 5-star recruit, top 26 profile. He was a little bit outside of what Virginia typically recruits, but he committed to Virginia, and then things went south. He reopened his commitment. The big boys came in, Kentucky, Carolina, Maryland, and then at the end he switched his commitment several months later. And so what happened here with Virginia is Virginia went outside the model. They knew what worked, but they went outside, and they wasted a bunch of time recruiting and giving a scholarship and having a commitment from Sacha-Killeya Jones, a potential one-and-done player who wasn't going to fit in UVA's model, and it ended up not working well for the producer, Sacha-Killeya Jones, who delayed his ultimate home, and for Virginia, who tied up a scholarship only for a little while. Now, the opposite of this model is when Virginia had a success. And this is a kid named Malcolm Brogdon, who's now playing in the NBA. His profile in college was much more fitting to Virginia's model. A solid player, but not a 5-star, attracting a lot of attention. No offers from Carolina or Kentucky or Duke. He had to settle for East Carolina and Minnesota and Arkansas and Clemson. But he highly valued the academic experience, which is a part of Virginia's model. Chose ultimately between Virginia and Harvard and shared a bond with Virginia's coach. Now, that worked out well for Malcolm and for Virginia. Two ACC titles, he's an AP All-American, he's now a Rookie of the Year candidate in the NBA. And what I want you guys to take from this illustration is that the hiring of producers needs to fit the model that you will put those producers in. And just like a football coach or a basketball coach, they've got to be recruiting kids that fit their model, and for an agent and broker, it is the exact same way. And so when you're figuring out step 2 in this process of how to hire and how to hire well, when you're figuring out who to hire, the most important feature of this is hiring producers that will fit your business model. Okay, so now we've talked about defining your hiring needs and figuring out who to hire. The next step is building the candidate pool, getting at bats. We asked firms how they rated themselves in different parts of the recruiting process, and building the candidate pool, getting at bats, was at the absolute bottom of the barrel. Selling the opportunity, we were good. Looking at the right place, figuring out who we're going to hire, we're pretty decent at that. But actually recruiting and prospecting, building the candidate pool, firms gave themselves a 4.5 out of 10. And the name of the game here is that this needs to be an all-hands-on-deck organizational commitment to getting at-bats. So many times we see organizations put this in the hands of an HR leader or put this in the hands of a sales leader, and one person's ability to drive a consistent recruiting pipeline when they have a full-time job is difficult. Now, HR leaders, sales leaders have a vitally important role in this process, but in terms of getting at bats, filling the funnel, building the candidate pool, it needs to be an organizational commitment that comes from the top. Producers, executives, owners, leaders within the organization all need to be responsible for building that candidate pool. Now, just a note here about using recruiters, because many firms do use recruiters in the process. And we found that the most successful firms, on average, use recruiters a little more than firms that have not demonstrated the same level of success in producer hiring. However, we also found that producers not hired by recruiters succeed in a little bit higher percentage than folks hired by recruiters. What I think this is really saying to agencies is that the folks that have used recruiters are the firms that are intentional about developing a producer pipeline. And it isn't so much about whether or not those ultimate producers succeed on a much higher level or even a slightly lower level, but a use of a recruiter signifies that a firm is very serious and intentional about developing a producer pipeline. And that, more than anything else, is going to be indicative of a firm's success in that area. All right, we're moving quickly. We've defined who we're going to hire. We've figured out who that is. We've talked about building the candidate pool, and now we've got to figure out, once we've got that candidate pool built, how to select winners. How, when you're interviewing candidates, do you figure out who's going to succeed and who won't? And a couple points about this. The first is that internships work. If you look at folks hired from college with a success rate of 50% with no internship, and then you look at colleges plus an internship at 83%, and that first column is commercial lines. We lost a word there. There's a similar increase in employee benefits. Those success rate jumps are absolutely massive. And in terms of an agency's economic returns from hiring producers, an 83% success rate versus a 50% success rate is a totally different ballgame. And so one of the things that works in selecting winners, especially if you're looking to hire college kids or younger kids, is that internships work. It's a free 60-day audition, effectively, for the candidate and the firm to see if there's a fit, to see if it's going to work, and when that takes place, success rates are much higher. The other thing that works in selecting winners is testing. And everybody's got their stories about which test they use and how they've customized the test, but everybody also has the story about the one time that they decided to go against the test and hire the person that everybody loved, and it didn't work out, and it took a really long time for that person to work their way out of the system. And that's what we found. The data supports the anecdotal evidence in this instance, because we've got a 12% delta in success rate if someone is successful, if someone gets a positive indication from the test versus a negative or inconclusive indication from a test. So those sales profile testing, sales potential, call reluctance testing, those work. The bigger point in selecting winners, we just showed you a couple tools here about what we found that works, is that firms are best when they have a process for hiring. And it can be as simple or as complicated as you like, but run people through a consistent process so you can evaluate your candidates on a consistent set of criteria. Okay, we've now hired some producers. How do we make sure that they succeed? Step 5 in this process. And we use another analogy here. Hopefully some of you have either read the book Bringing Down the House or seen the movie 21. It's about this MIT blackjack team that's a bunch of math wizards that goes out to Vegas. And when they go out to Vegas, they sit around these tables and they count cards, and they don't bet very much. They kind of bet a little until they've counted the cards to the point where the table is hot and it's likely to return high returns for the bettors. And then when that happens, they call a bunch of other players over and they bet heavily on the table, knowing that they're not going to win every hand, it's blackjack, but they're knowing that the conditions are right, and their job is to bet heavily when the conditions are right, because that's when they're going to take home the most cash. That is exactly how producer recruiting works. When you're making a bet on a producer, and you're making a bet on producer year after year and groups of producers, you're going to be more successful betting if the conditions for success are correct. Now, in our industry, we don't just have to count cards. We have levers that we can pull to increase the odds of success. We can tinker with the production environment. We can discuss sales training, technical training. How do we use mentors? How do we employ sales tools? We have a lot of levers that agents and brokers can pull. The key is Pull those levers, and they're going to be different for every firm, but customize that mix for your firm, and then when you've got a model that works, that's when you bet big. A couple things we found to be more or less universal across all firms. The first is that specialization works. The success rate went from 59% to 66% when producers were able to be hired into a specialty group, and team selling works. The success rate went from 60% to 69% across all producers when producers were hired into team selling environments as opposed to individual selling environments. And if you look at this chart, even you think about that on employee benefits, you've got a 19% jump in success rate if producers are hired into team selling environments. So there are things that we've seen proven time and time again. Another one of these is mentoring, and mentoring is one of those topics that is everybody's got a different opinion on how mentoring should work. And what we found was that if you look at mentoring on an overall basis, there's not a huge difference between folks that are mentored and their success rate of 63% and folks that aren't, a 60% success rate. However, when you break this down a little bit into different constituencies, different groups of producers that are hired, you get a different picture. Folks hired from the outside the industry, their mentoring success rate jumps 17%. People with no sales experience, increase in success rate of 10%. Younger folks, increase in success rate of 8%. So all of a sudden, you look at mentoring on a holistic picture across everybody, yeah, you can make an argument that there's not a big difference. But if you apply mentoring very selectively based on your population of producer hires, you can make a dramatic impact on the success rate of those producers. And that's a very important piece of the puzzle for folks. The final piece of this is owning and leading the recruiting and hiring and development strategy. And we can't emphasize this enough, and there are really 4 pieces to this. You've got to have a leadership team that emphasizes the importance of recruiting and development across the organization. And we believe, more than ever about our premise that your ability to hire and recruit producers is going to be the fundamental driver of long-term success. And you've got to have a leadership team that makes that a cultural imperative. Second, you've got to lead the effort. It's not enough to say that, but it's got to be that effort has to be led and driven down within the organization, and there has to be accountability and actual tasks built into to management to get this done. Third, continue to customize your process, your targets, your levers of maximizing success based on your firm's experience and your firm's attributes. As your firm grows, as your firm becomes more specialized, as your firm expands geographically, all of those things mean different things for how you want to recruit and train and develop producers. And so you've always got to be tweaking the system to find maximum efficiency. And finally, you've got to be willing to invest the time and the money, not only in hiring a producer, which is expensive, but also in mentoring, in training. Those are not inconsequential costs. And so you as a firm have to be willing to make those sacrifices and investments in time and money. And kind of overriding all this, we've got this strange alien-looking figure on the right-hand side of the screen looking in the mirror, and accountability is such a huge piece of this. If you want to be serious about recruiting and development, accountability has to be a part of that. And that means that it's in someone's job description. Someone's compensation is based upon this. Ideally, several people's compensation and bonuses are based on the firms and their ability to lead this effort. So this is a pretty quick webinar, but hopefully this gives you guys an idea of what we're seeing in the marketplace about how firms hire and how firms hire well. And as a recap, step 1 is define your hiring needs. Be thoughtful about how many producers you want to hire. 2, figure out the profile of those producers and who fits best in your system. 3, be intentional about building the funnel, filling the funnel. 4, when you've got the funnel, have a systemized process, a consistent process to select the folks that are going to succeed. When you've got them on board, pull the levers to maximize success. If you hire them and then you leave them on their own, that's not a recipe for success. And then finally, have that accountability in owning and leading the strategy. Thank you for tuning into this. Tara, I will turn it back to you if we've got questions from the audience.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian, so much. I am seeing a couple of questions come in, and for those of you that haven't asked your questions, feel free to start sending them. We'll go through some of these. One of the questions that came in early on, Brian, was around how do you define success rates for producers versus being unsuccessful?
Sure. There's a couple different ways to do it. One way is just to simply say, did they validate? Did they become a validated producer that is now paid solely according to the agency's producer commission schedule? That eliminates any success or no success rating on producers early in their development. So when we did our survey, we asked firms to make a are they successful or are they not successful decision, and we asked them to base that on, is the producer still employed, are they still hitting the goals that you set out for them, and would you hire them again? And if those 3 questions are met, then that's a successful producer hire at this point.
Okay, thanks, Brian. A couple other questions that came in. Do you have any thoughts about where people can find potential sales potential test programs?
Sure. There are several in the industry. Some of the ones that we see used most are Caliper and Omnia, I believe, and Profiles International. I believe that those are the 3 most common that we see, and those are kind of sales potential, sales skill testing systems. And a lot of firms, when they've use those resources over and over again, will start to customize it to their specific producer profiles. But I think those are the 3 most popular that we see.
A couple other questions coming in, and we'll be sensitive to time here. How do you motivate the entire team in team selling? Producers are somewhat obvious. What about the rest of the team?
Yeah, if there are non-producer pieces of the team, so we're talking about account executives and non-production resources, it might be loss control, et cetera. Some firms have a philosophy that they should get a piece of the commissions. We tend to believe in a normal situation that those folks should be salaried and bonus, but that a piece of their bonus compensation has got to be tied to the overall success, the sales success of the team. And that's how we would think about a pure non-production resource. Obviously, if it's producers that are a part of the team, and how do you incentivize those folks to help the younger producers, then that tends to be more around account sharing, et cetera. But a healthy bonus component we think is best for non-production resources.
How many years do you think it takes for a new producer to validate?
Generally from 3 to 4. There are folks that validate earlier, folks that validate later. 3 has tended to kind of be the industry benchmark, and we have a lot of clients who will kind of develop their unvalidated producer compensation systems based on a 3-year model. I'd say if you ask folks, 3 is the most prevalent. But again, depending on what you're asking them to do, the cost of the producer hire, obviously it's easier for a $40,000 hire to validate than a $200,000 hire. But it kind of in and around that 3-year time frame is typical.
Okay. I'm going to ask 2 more questions. There's a handful of other questions that are coming in, and Brian, I'd love to follow up with you and make sure that we can get these answered. I want to be sensitive to the time here. Just a few others. Can you describe in a little more detail what an effective internship program looks like?
Sure. An effective internship program is one that really gets the potential producer acclimated to the organization. We found in working with folks that have internships that some of the best stuff that they do is take the interns and rotate them around through the organization and have them meet everyone from CFO, CEO, HR leaders, IT leaders, non-production resources, business unit leaders, leaders of different offices, because what that does is it gets them comfortable when they come on board full-time with their organization and with reaching out to those folks who they will need to eventually make sales. And so, kind of number one component in a successful internship program is to get those folks widespread exposure to your organization and how it works. The second piece is just to make sure you've got some stuff in there for you to evaluate that candidate and how he or she gets along with folks, how they present themselves, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, Brian, I'm gonna ask, and do you have a few more minutes? If there's a few more questions I'd like to ask.
I do.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, we're gonna keep going then. Awesome. Can you talk through some of the current trends in new producer compensation models?
Sure. When I do this, though, keep in mind that so much of this is customized based on who's getting hired, what stage of their career, and the firm that they are going into. So there is one of the things that we see more of lately is a declining salary type arrangement, where you would hire a producer with a salary of, let's say, $100,000 for year one, and then that salary backs down to $80,000 in year two, and then it might go to $50,000 in year three, and then it's zero going forward. And along the way, the producer is replacing some of that salary with commission. And so that's something we've started to see more of. But I still think the most popular thing we see is just kind of a straight salary, along with some incentives for either activity-based incentives or commission incentives. And it's usually not a full commission, because a lot of times the unvalidated producers are working with more senior producers on their initial accounts, and so it might be a 10% or 5% split in addition to their salary. But again, this can change so dramatically, where if you've got to bring a producer on from another firm, or you're going to take a successful commercial real estate rep who's making $180,000, you might have a more customized program and a little more expensive program for somebody like that.
Okay. I'm going to combine a few of these together. A few questions around, either stats or consideration for whether or not to use a recruiter, and then the second being, what are some of the most successful recruiting platforms that you've seen? LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, et cetera. Thoughts on that?
Sure. Again, I think that if you look at the universe of producers that are hired, you're not necessarily going to get a greater success rate if they come through a recruiter versus they don't come through a recruiter. But what a recruiter can do is help build that funnel, which is a critically important piece of the process. Really, and so we do believe that a recruiter can have a valuable impact, but it's not the solution to everything. And often, as I said earlier, using a recruiter is just indicative of a firm that's really intent on building that funnel. Social media is certainly an effective tool. I think, though, sometimes folks think that social media is kind of a magic solution, and it's not. Even in the social media universe, a lot of that is still based on existing relationships that you've got with somebody, or it's a producer that uses LinkedIn to set up a meeting and that sort of thing. And so I would encourage active social media usage, but not to think that that's going to be the ultimate answer. Some of the most effective recruiting platforms that we have seen are recruiters that are focused on our industry, and there are several, and I'm not going to get them all, and so don't think that I'm going to miss some. But I know that Jeff Jenkins and the Jenkins brothers have a platform that they're using to do producer recruiting. Shull Baker, I believe, is the name of a firm in Dallas that does some producer recruiting. And so there are folks out there that focus on our industry, and we've generally seen some pretty decent success from our clients with those folks.
A few others. I'm gonna just combine these together a little bit. Several people asking for different kinds of resources to determine whether they should be commission-based, salary. How do we determine the salary bonus amounts, structures based upon kind of regional areas?
Yeah, Tara, I don't have great insight into that question on such a high level.
Yeah.
So much of it depends on the individual functions that people are talking about. Overall, philosophically, we believe that production should be commission-based, and then non-production should be kind of salary and bonus-based. In terms of what percentage is bonus and how that's structured, that varies so much from firm to firm. And certainly the levels of compensation vary so much regionally that it's almost better for folks to understand what's required to be competitive of themselves in their own market. In the past, we've done some regional compensation analysis, but Paul, I don't think we do that anymore in best practices, just because the data was so difficult. Even when we're doing surveys on some of this stuff, it's so difficult to define the position and the role. So particularly that you're always comparing apples to apples. So I apologize that that's not a great answer, but without a lot more specifics, I think that's a little bit of a tough question.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like I said, I was kind of combining several of them together.
Sure.
Can you just real quickly restate those kind of three most popular testing services? You mentioned Omnia.
Omnia, Caliper, and Profiles International.
Good. Well, Brian, the questions that came in were fantastic. Thank you so much for your insights and sharing your expertise. There's a handful that I may follow up with you, and we'll make sure that we get all of these wrapped up in a package post-webinar. With that, I would actually like to, again, thank you, and then
thank you.
Turn it over to Doug Moore, who is Vertafore's Vice President of Solution Consulting.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you, Brian. That was excellent content. And as a hiring manager myself, I think even though we don't hire for the insurance industry per se, we're insurance technology. I'm going to take some of the recommendations back to my own house and put them in place. Excellent job. So now you've hired that producer. You've put all this work into recruiting top talent, vetting them through a solid process. You've put an offer out there, and they've accepted the offer. And now it's day one at the agency, and now comes the time, and first impressions are always very important. You're going to give them the tools to be able to run their book of business, and I think a lot of insurance agencies don't necessarily think about that first impression or the tools that you're going to put in the hands of the producers. And that's what Vertafore is here for. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to enable these new producers to be successful in their first 30, 60, 90, 120 days, and then going on into their career at your independent agency. The first thing is we have to look at providing technology that's going to allow the sales velocity that Brian talked about. It's real important that the technology is not a hindrance, but a helper to them managing their book of business. Second is, and especially as Brian talked about, the new and younger workforce that we're bringing into our businesses, the millennials and even the younger folks that might be coming into the agency. I mean, they're used to an on-demand world where at a touch of a button they have access to everything within their world. So being able to access information anytime, anywhere is very important. my son, I have a 17-year-old son who's about to embark on a college career. He's never seen a green screen in his life or a character-based terminal. So, we have to think about using web-based technology and providing a very up-to-date, modern user experience. And then, same thing. My son, he downloads apps and works on apps on his phone or on his iPad Mini. So where it's appropriate, we should be able to offer mobile apps to our producers as well. So before we get into the technology, I'm going to go through a couple quick product demonstrations of some tools that we have seen from Vertafore that have been very widely adopted within the producer community, both established producers and new producers in the business. But the first thing is you have to understand what are the needs of the producer. So, obviously we hire producers to bring in revenue in the door. So, and revenue typically for most agencies makes up two flavors. We've got to go out there and be hunting new business, but at the same time, we're asking our producers to work with their existing book, cross-selling additional lines of business or policies into those existing customers. Obviously retention is extremely important, so we've got to keep track of, how our retention percentage is going against industry averages. The second thing is being able to manage sales goals, and this is done at both an individual level and at a manager level. So gaining visibility into the goals, providing motivation, scorecards, so that the producers can see not only how they stack up against their commission and quota, but maybe against their peers within their sales team. Like I said, most producers want to be able to take the information on the road and be not locked into having to enter information when they get back to the office. And then, there has to be collaboration and interaction with the team that's actually servicing the account. So having information go fluidly, move back and forth between whatever tools the producer is using on their desktop or mobile device and what's happening back in the office, critical for that free flow of information. So the first solution that we're going to take a look at is Vertafore Agency Sales Track. And this is a full-featured, purpose-built customer relationship management system, or CRM. And what's unique about Sales Track are a few things. Number one, we've built in insurance-specific capabilities into the solution so that, things like X dates, premiums, revenue, all of that is captured as we're progressing, a lead through the different stages of the sales cycle to an opportunity and then close one business. It provides an advanced reporting platform, and we didn't go reinvent the wheel here. We looked at what was available in the market, and we built on one of the most widely adopted CRM solutions out there in the marketplace for small and medium businesses, and that's the Microsoft Dynamics CRM platform. So we were able to rapidly build the insurance-specific functionality, but take advantage of all the foundational pieces that Microsoft had in the CRM solution. And part of the secret sauce here as well is we built integration, two-way integration with our agency management system, AMS 360. It's also using our single sign-on capabilities. So a producer, if they are using other components of the Vertafore suite, like our personalized comparative rater or the Reference Connect set solution, which is our content library of different information related to writing insurance policies and going out there and getting new business, they have that one sign-on and can get access to all the applications that we've enabled them to. And then, of course, it's web-based in the cloud. So let's take a quick look at what Sales Track is made of. And I am going to share my screen here and then switch over to my browser. And there might be a little lag time, so if it doesn't refresh right away, don't be alarmed, but in a second or two, you should see what I'm seeing, and that's my browser-based user interface of my daily dashboard. And the beauty of Vertafore Agency Sales Track is I can configure how I want the system to look very quickly. So this is kind of the default sales overview. that kind of everybody can land at, and it quickly gives me a view into my activities. And these activities could be unique just to the sales cycle, or they could be synced up back with the agency management system, and we determine how that works. It also gives me a quick snapshot into my open leads and then my open opportunities. It gives me a couple quick reports, shows me what my upcoming expiration dates are for some of my leads out there. Shows me also, as I progress leads into an opportunity, where's my funnel? How much do I have in proposed status versus still in kind of development? And then this is a quick snapshot into my monthly one opportunities for 2017. Now, if I wanted to, create a custom dashboard, I went out and created Doug's dashboard. This gives me a view of the same data, just organized a little differently. So, I really want to kind of emphasize the funnel there, my X-Date report, all my open opportunities. In this case, I brought in a dashboard that shows me my NICS codes, which I could go search that on, a text search if I wanted to, maybe go see what my NICS code is for my paving contractors, and then leads that are open this week. And behind each one of these dashboards, if I wanted to, I can actually drill into the details. So let's say, for example, I want to drill into the leads that made up that X-Day report and maybe just pull up this particular lead, Doug's Diner. So I can go into the lead object and see all the information out there. And at this point, the way that I would progress a lead to an opportunity is I'd have to fill out some basic information, which I've done, and I just simply click the qualify button up there, and that's going to convert that lead to an opportunity, and now that becomes part of that opportunity funnel. It also has some intelligence that says, hey, there's already an account out there, so do you want to create a new one, or do you want to pull the duplicate? So I'm going to say, yeah, this is a duplicate, so this is going to go against our prospect, Doug's Diner, and we'll go ahead and merge that one together. So it's got some pretty good intelligence on duplicate accounts to make sure that I'm not creating a whole bunch of new accounts in the CRM system. And you can see what it's done is it's progressed this particular lead from lead qualify stage to developed. And you'll notice now it's asking for some more information. And this is some of that insurance-specific information that I had made reference to. So the first thing is, I need to tell it what type of opportunity. Is this going to be a monoline or a package opportunity? Let's just say it's monoline. And then I've got to define what line of business is. So we'll just say that this is just a GL opportunity. And at this point, all I have to do is just say I'm going to save that record, and it's committed that, and it's just left it at this stage. But I've got to come back and do some additional analysis to make sure that we've got all the right coverages set up for them. And then at the point when we actually send this over to our servicing team to create the submission package, I'd mark that complete once we've actually gotten the submissions out to the carriers, and then determine, a proposal that we're going to present to the carrier, to the insured, and what the different options of them are. So that's just a quick snapshot into Sales Track, showing you how it's got built-in insurance-specific capability. It's got a developed workflow, so I go through the different stages based on, the information that I'm nurturing through the sales process. One other thing I kind of want to show as well is some of the advanced reporting. So I'm going to go over here to my reports, and I'm going to let's just go to some of the quick link reports. And one report that I know is very widely used within our customer base is I want to find out where these leads came from. So we've got we're capturing this information throughout the process. And, we have lead source, which is a drop-down table that we established, and we then, track that through the process to see, how many leads came in through cold calls or referrals. As in many cases, not specified was chosen a lot of the times. It shows then how many became qualified leads, and then how many actually turned into revenue, and then what that revenue impact was for those particular lead sources. So this is a very valuable report, just standard out of the box that our customers get a lot of value out of. Now, if you remember, one thing I mentioned was the ability to communicate with the servicing team, and especially as I'm going through loss or renewal processes, maybe cross-sell opportunities. I want to be able to see and get information from my agency management system. So in this case, let me just pull up really quickly an account that we've got in the back office system. And this is an existing customer. We've written a number of policies with them. It gives us a snapshot of the activities that were captured on the front end and then passed over to the management system. It gives me, policy information. But what we add as an added value on top of just the base CRM functionality that Microsoft gives us is the ability to go and look at information that's in the agency management system. So, for example, I can see all the suspenses that are out there. These are my to-do items out there for this particular account. I can look at all activities. I can look at documents that I might have in the system. I can even get to policy details. So I could come in and say, show me all the policies that have been effective date since the first of the year. And it gives me they have a package policy. And when I choose that policy, now what it's doing is actually showing me the policy details that are in the agency management system. So you can see the value here is that a producer can get information that's coming from the back office system without having to log into the agency management system. And I'm sure many of you have experienced the situation where the producers really don't want to have to log into the agency management system. This gives them a very easy way to get access to that information without having to log into the management system. So that was just a quick drive-by of some of the functionality that we provide in the CRM solution. And now what I'd like to do is just transition really quickly to another solution that we provide our producers with. And this is actually not only used by producers, it could be used by the principals in the agency, which many times the principals are managing a book as well, or even the customer service rep or account manager, non-quota carrying personnel that have responsibility for servicing an account. And, when they're out of the office, they can also utilize the mobile app. So the story here really is you should be able to stay connected with your insureds and your data in the agency management system no matter where you're at, whether you're at lunch, maybe taking a day off, working from home. It gives you anytime access to that information. And, what we don't want to have our customers do is, give the message back to the insured that, hey, this is after hours, we'll get to this on Monday. If it's a service level agreement that you have with your insured that you're servicing them after hours, we give you the capability to do that. So with Vertafore Mobile, some of the key capabilities that we provide are real-time access from the agency management system, and it's two ways. So our open architecture, which is built on industry standards, allows you to get data out of the agency management system and push it back in a real-time fashion. And this is an app that you can download from the App Store. If you're a Vertafore customer today, and you're on Vertafore Agency Platform, you actually already have this application available to you. So talk to your Vertafore single sign-on administrator and start playing around with this capability. It supports both a tablet user experience and a mobile phone user experience. And there's a number of things you can do. You can initiate a new client on the mobile device. You can complete a suspense item. You can view policies. It gives you a wealth of capability that you can do. And in addition, if you have access to Reference Connect, which I referenced earlier, you can also access it from there as well. So let's take a look at the Vertafore mobile app. And what I'm going to do now is pull up, and I'm actually viewing on my laptop my mobile device. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my mobile phone. And what you can see here is my initial dashboard. One of the real fun things is we have some developers with a sense of humor. So my favorite part of getting into Vertafore Mobile is the login screen. Last night when I logged in about 10 o'clock just to check on my data, I got a little message that said smile. So But if you do use the app, you'll have some smiles on your face when you see the messages come in. It's really delightful. But right from this screen, like I said, I could add a client. I can drill into my to-dos, my suspense items. This, again, is coming directly from AMS 360 real time, so I can go in and get some more information about this. If I actually want to either edit the suspense item or mark it complete, I can. So what I can do is I'll mark that complete, and then what I should see now is my to-dos go from 5 down to 4. If I want to drill into the customer, I could drill into Tim's Mobile Pet Grooming or Gary's Lawn and Garden, or what I'll do is let's go into that same customer that we were just looking at, and that's Gift Raffle Lock Haven. So what you saw on the sales track user interface was a web-based view into the information on this particular insured. And now what we're doing is we're seeing that same information in a mobile app user experience. So we'll go into policies, and there's that package policy, and I could even go drill into the package details at this point. Or, as you can see, I could create a new suspense or to-do, add an activity, add a contact, or add a note to this account. I also have the ability to drill into other pieces of this particular account. So I want to go in and look at the documents, for example. So you can see it's very intuitive, very easy to use, as you would expect with any mobile app. And I just wanted to give kind of a quick tour of that, because I know we're getting close to the end of our presentation. So we'll go back and just kind of summarize a few things that we just covered in the last 20 minutes. So Vertafore, if you don't know us, we are the leading provider of technology for insurance sales professionals in the United States. There is no company that equals the solution footprint that we provide or the number of users, insurance professionals that are logging into our applications on a daily basis. We have over 500,000 users logging into Vertafore technology on a daily basis. And the keys for producers, and especially with the theme of what we're talking about today, is, like I said, we want to improve sales velocity. We want to get access to information anywhere, anytime. We must be working on a modern web-based user experience. It's what our users demand and what your new hires that you're bringing into the agency are going to demand as well. And then, like I said, some apps are better suited for a web user interface. Some apps are better suited for that mobile app experience. And what we've done is, through our years of experience and working closely with our customers, figured out what is the right solution for the different pieces that a producer would need. So with that, I will wrap up, and I know we just have a few minutes, Tara, for Q&A, but if there's any questions, I'm more than willing to address them.
Great. Thank you, Doug, so much. There's just a handful of questions that came in, and if someone hasn't asked questions, feel free to ask them now in your QA app. But a couple questions. The app for the agent looks great. Is there an app available for customers?
Yes, we have. It's not an app. We have a solution we refer to as Client Portal, Vertafore Client Portal. And what we've done there is we've taken the approach of providing a responsive web user interface. And I know that's a mouthful of words, to net it down to very simple speak that the average person could understand, it means that the web page scales to the right size based on the device. So we don't need to have an app in the App Store. We can actually have that same mobile user experience with a web page. And it also has the capability so that you can private label it so that on the insured's desktop, they could have an icon that would say ABC Insurance. They click on it, and it would go right to the client portal. So it's the same user experience that an insured would get with the mobile app.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Doug. A few others that are here. Is Sales Track mobile? Have a mobile app?
It takes the same approach as Client Portal. It's a responsive web page. So when I pull up Sales Track on my iPad, for example, on my tablet, it'll be kind of the full user experience. If I pull it up on my phone, it's going to have a user experience that looks and feels like it should run on a phone.
Thanks. If someone is already an AMS 360 user, how do they get access to the mobile app? Yep,
that's a great question. That is something they can talk to their account manager. There's a small monthly fee to use the mobile app, and you can, as long as you're AMS 360 online and using Vertafore single sign-on, or you can get enabled for VSSO, you can use that mobile app.
Great. I think there's a handful of other questions that we'll answer offline. They're a little specific. Here's one. Is there any integration with Sacha-Killeya?
That is on our roadmap today. SalesTrack only integrates with AMS 360. So again, I'd ask you to reach out to your account manager, and they can talk more about the timelines on when we'll be delivering that integration.
Perfect. Okay. Doug, thank you so much. We are right at our time. Thank you to everyone who was able to join us this afternoon. Again, if you had specific questions that we didn't answer, we will be going through these with both Brian and with Doug to make sure everyone gets the detailed information that they need. We will also be providing you with a full recording of this webinar end-to-end that will include both audio and visual. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and just respond to those emails that you'll see here in the next couple of days. Again, I want to thank everyone so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.